The artifact floated in the darkness of space between two planets. It had been there for thousands of years and nobody could make it work. Every species in the galaxy had tried to study it or activate it, but nothing happened. The massive ring was made of black metal with strange symbols that seemed to move when anyone looked at them directly. Captain Jacob Pierce stood on the bridge of his ship and stared at the screen showing the artifact. His crew had traveled for 3 months to reach this place. The Galactic Council had finally invited humans to try what 200 other alien species had failed to do. Most aliens thought humans were too primitive to succeed, but they were running out of options. Lieutenant Amy Collins worked at her station and calculated how to approach the artifact safely. She looked worried as her fingers moved across the controls. The ring was much bigger than anyone had described in the reports. A small moon could fit through the center of it. Dr. Henry Lloyd stood near the science station and adjusted his glasses nervously. He was the smartest scientist on the mission, but even he felt uncertain about what they were attempting. The Vex aliens had lost 3 teams trying to get close to the artifact. Some kind of invisible force had pushed them away violently. Other species had tried different approaches, but the result was always the same. The gate rejected everyone. Jacob made his decision quickly. He told Amy to move the ship forward, but very slowly. He wanted every sensor pointed at the artifact and ready to record anything unusual. The doctor nodded and began monitoring all the equipment carefully. The ship moved closer and everyone on the bridge felt tension building. 1 kilometer away from the artifact and nothing happened. Then 500 meters and still nothing. At 200 meters, the crew started to worry because this was already closer than anyone else had ever gotten. Commander Lisa Harper checked her tactical displays and spoke quietly. The Theron species had reported that the energy field activated at 300 meters. Something was different this time, but nobody knew what or why. Jacob ordered the ship to keep moving forward. At 100 meters from the artifact, something finally happened. The black metal began to glow with soft blue light. The strange symbols lit up, and the light flowed through them like water moving through channels. The glow grew brighter and started pulsing like a heartbeat. It seemed to be welcoming them. Amy spoke in a whisper and told everyone that the artifact was opening. The center of the ring had always looked solid, even though it was empty space. Now it began to shimmer and change. Colors that humans had never seen before swirled and danced in the center. They formed a spiral pattern that seemed to lead somewhere impossible. All the sensors went crazy with readings that made no sense according to normal physics. Jacob asked if they were recording everything, and Henry confirmed that every second was being captured. Then the doctor said something that made everyone uncomfortable. He detected a signal coming from the artifact, but it was not aimed at the ship. The signal was pointing directly at Jacob himself. It was calling specifically for the captain. The crew exchanged nervous looks because this was not part of any plan. Ancient artifacts were not supposed to choose individual people. Henry studied his screens and explained that the signal was unlike anything in their database. It was not radio waves or gravity or anything they had names for. Whatever technology the artifact used was completely unknown to human science. Lisa suggested they should contact Earth Command and report what was happening. This situation was far beyond their original mission parameters. They needed instructions from headquarters before doing anything else. Jacob stared at the swirling portal and felt something strange. The pulsing light seemed to match the rhythm of his own heartbeat. Every instinct told him that leaving now would be a terrible mistake. Humanity had finally reached something important, and turning away could mean they would never get another chance. He told Lisa to open a communication channel to Earth Command, but they were not leaving yet. He wanted to understand why this ancient gate had chosen humans after rejecting every other species in the galaxy. He wanted to know what it wanted with him specifically. The artifact responded to his determination by glowing even brighter. Somewhere deep inside the ancient metal, something had woken up after sleeping for thousands of years. It had been waiting patiently through all those centuries, and now finally the right species had arrived. Jacob stood up from his command chair and straightened his uniform. He looked at his crew and saw fear mixed with excitement on their faces. They were all young by galactic standards. Humans had only been traveling in space for 50 years, while some alien species had been exploring the stars for thousands of years. The other species in the Galactic Council looked down on humans as primitive newcomers who did not understand how the galaxy really worked. But now this ancient artifact had opened for them. It had rejected the proud Vex with their crystal bodies and advanced engineering. It had pushed away the wise Keltheran who kept records going back 50,000 years. It had refused the Theron who could survive in any environment. Yet when a simple human ship approached it, had welcomed them with light and warmth. Henry pulled up more data on his screens and reported that the energy readings were stabilizing. The portal was not getting bigger or more dangerous. It seemed to be waiting patiently for them to make the next move. The symbols on the black metal ring were still glowing and pulsing, but now they formed patterns that almost looked like words in a language nobody could read. Amy checked the navigation systems and confirmed the ship was holding position perfectly. They were hovering just 100 meters from the artifact and nothing was pushing them away. The invisible force field that had attacked every other species was not affecting them at all. Lisa monitored the tactical systems for any threats. Space around them was empty except for their ship and the artifact. No alien vessels were nearby and no weapons were pointed at them, but she knew that would change soon. Once word spread that humans had activated the ancient gate, every species in the galaxy would want to know how and why. Jacob made his choice. He told his crew they were going to send a probe through the portal to see what was on the other side. They would proceed carefully and scientifically, but they would not run away from this opportunity. Humanity had struggled for everything they achieved in space. They had been laughed at and dismissed by aliens who thought they knew better. Now finally they had a chance to prove their worth. The ancient gate pulsed, brighter as if it approved of his decision and waited for them to take the next step forward into the unknown. The council chamber erupted with noise. The moment the transmission from Jacob's ship reached all the alien delegates, holographic screens showed the impossible sight of the ancient artifact glowing with blue light for a human vessel. Every other species had been violently rejected, but humans were being welcomed like old friends. Ambassador Claire. Dixon stood at the human platform trying to stay calm, while hundreds of alien representatives shouted in dozens of different languages. The translation computers struggled to keep up with all the angry voices talking at once. The Vex commander was furious, and his crystalline body flashed red with anger. He accused humans of tampering with the artifact and said no primitive species could activate something that his people could not. His voice boomed across the chamber, demanding an explanation. Claire shot back quickly and reminded everyone that humans had followed the exact same protocols as every other species. The only difference was that the artifact had actually responded to them. She refused to apologize for succeeding where others had failed. An old voice called for silence and everyone stopped shouting. Elder Myra from the Keltheran species raised her long, elegant hand. She was one of the oldest beings in the galaxy, and her people kept records going back 50,000 years. When she spoke, even the most aggressive species listened carefully. Elder Myra explained that her archives contained 17,000 recorded attempts to activate the artifact. Every species and every type of technology had failed until this moment. She stated this as simple fact without emotion or judgment. The chamber became quiet as everyone watched the live feed from Jacob's ship. The crew was preparing to send a probe into the swirling portal. The artifact continued to pulse steadily like it was alive and breathing. A Theran diplomat whose body was made of gas asked a genuine question without hostility. What did humans possess that made them special? This was not an accusation but real curiosity about why the artifact had chosen them. Claire wished she knew the answer. Scientists on Earth had been debating the same question for hours since the first report came in. Humans were not the strongest species or the smartest or the most advanced. By most measurements, they were completely ordinary in the galactic community. Elder Myra suggested thoughtfully that perhaps being ordinary was exactly why the gate had opened for humans. Before anyone could ask what she meant, the display screens changed suddenly. The probe had entered the portal and was sending back data that made no sense at all. The interior of the gate was not a tunnel or a doorway to another place. Instead, it was a massive library. Vast halls stretched impossibly far and were filled with crystal structures that glow. Fed with stored information, the probe's cameras captured images of star charts showing galaxies that no longer existed. There were mathematical formulas describing dimensions beyond the normal four that everyone knew. Historical records showed civilizations that had risen and fallen millions of years before the current galactic cycle had even begun. A delegate from the Morith species whispered in awe. This was a repository left by the precursors. Every species had legends about the ancient race that had seeded technology and life throughout the galaxy, before mysteriously vanishing. Most people thought the precursors were just myths invented to explain strange archaeological findings. But if this gate was real, then maybe the legends were true. The probe moved deeper into the library, guided by the mysterious signal that Henry had detected earlier. The cameras focused on a central chamber where a single pedestal stood in the middle of an empty space. On top of the pedestal sat a device that looked like a crystal sphere. When the probe got close, the sphere activated and projected a holographic figure into the air. The figure looked almost human. It had 2 arms and 2 legs and a head with eyes and a mouth. The being could have walked down any street on Earth without anyone noticing anything strange. When it spoke, the translation computers nearly overloaded trying to process a language that was older than any known civilization. The holographic figure spoke clearly. If anyone was receiving this message, then their children had finally come home after a very long time. Every delegate in the council chamber stopped breathing. Claire felt her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The figure smiled but looked sad at the same time. It explained that they were called the Architects and they had been waiting for 3 million years. They had seeded life across the galaxy and guided evolution on many worlds. They had left markers and tools for the species that would come after them. But they had made a terrible mistake along the way. The Architects had given other species technology too quickly. Those species never had to struggle or earn their advancements through hard work and innovation. They became dependent on the gifts they received and stopped developing on their own. Their civilizations became stagnant and weak. The Architects realized too late what they had done wrong. The holographic figure gestured and the image expanded to show a planet. It had blue oceans and green continents and white clouds swirling in the atmosphere. It was Earth, but millions of years younger than the planet humans currently lived on. The Architect explained their final choice. They took the last of their genetic material and created one final world. They gave this world no shortcuts and no ancient technology to discover. There would be no easy path to the stars. They forced the inhabitants to evolve naturally and struggle, and innovate without any help or guidance. They wanted to see what their baseline genetics could achieve, if given enough time and left completely alone. Claire felt tears running down her face. Around the chamber, alien delegates sat in complete shock, unable to move or speak. The Architect continued speaking. Humans were not just another species that had evolved intelligence by accident. They were the Architects themselves, reborn through natural selection and true evolution. Humans carried the original adaptability and creativity and stubborn refusal to accept limitations. Now they had reached the threshold of advancement. The gate only opened for those who carried the pure genetic markers unchanged by artificial enhancement or outside interference. The hologram flickered slightly. Inside the repository, humans would find everything the Architects had learned and built and discovered about the universe. It belonged to humanity by right of inheritance. They should use it wisely, and use it better than the Architects had. Most importantly, they should remember that they earned their place among the stars through their own effort. They must never forget that struggle was what made them strong. The message ended abruptly. The probe's cameras showed the crystal sphere going dark and silent. On the bridge of his ship, Jacob looked at his crew and saw his own shock reflected on every face. Humanity was not just lucky or special. They were the direct descendants of the beings who had built the foundations of galactic civilization itself. They were the children of the Architects finally coming home after 3 million years. Amy broke the stunned silence with a nervous laugh. She said this explained a lot about why humans were so stubborn about everything. Despite the magnitude of what they had just learned, Jacob found himself smiling. Only a human would find humor in discovering they were descended from an ancient super race. Dr. Henry started giving orders to begin downloading data from the repository. Someone needed to contact Ambassador Dixon immediately because she would have to explain this situation to the very confused and probably angry council. The artifact pulsed even brighter, as if it was pleased that its long wait was finally over. After 3 million years of silence, the ancient gate had recognized its creator's descendants. The children had indeed come home, and now everything would change for humanity and the galaxy. The news spread across Earth faster than anything in human history. Every television channel and news website and social media platform exploded with the revelation. Humanity was not just another species that had evolved by chance. They were the descendants of the architects who had created the entire galactic civilization. Within hours, everyone on Earth knew that they were special in ways nobody had imagined. In the council chamber, Ambassador Claire stood facing a very different atmosphere than before. The hostility had disappeared but was replaced by something more complicated. She could see awe in some alien faces and fear in others. Some species looked resentful that the newcomers had turned out to be the most important species in the galaxy. Claire spoke carefully because she knew every word would be analyzed and remembered. She told the council that humans had no idea about their true origins. For all of human history, they believed they had evolved naturally on Earth and were alone until they developed space travel. This revelation shocked humans as much as it shocked everyone else. Elder Myra nodded slowly from her platform. She said Claire was telling the truth. The architects had designed their experiment to be completely isolated. Humanity developed without any knowledge of their heritage because that was the entire point of the test. The Vex commander was still angry, and his voice boomed across the chamber. Now humans had access to technology that took other species thousands of years to develop. This changed the balance of power in the galaxy dramatically, and he did not trust humans with that much knowledge. Claire had expected this reaction. She proposed that humanity would share everything they retrieved from the repository with the council. They would not hoard knowledge or use it to gain advantage over other species. The architects had clearly intended this information for everyone, not just their descendants. A Theron diplomat said the offer sounded generous, but asked if Earth's governments would actually honor it. Reports were already coming in about military buildups on Earth. Nationalist movements were claiming humanity's right to rule the galaxy because of their special heritage. Claire sighed because she could not deny what was happening. Back on Earth, some groups were demanding that humans take their rightful place as the galaxy's leaders. Extremists on both sides were pushing for confrontation instead of cooperation. Some humans wanted to dominate and some aliens wanted to destroy the repository before humans could use it. She admitted that humanity faced the same challenge the architects had faced long ago. How do you use knowledge responsibly? How do you advance without repeating the mistakes of the past? She would not pretend humans were perfect. They had hotheads and power-hungry fools just like every species. But they also had people who understood that this inheritance was a responsibility, not just a gift. Meanwhile, aboard Jacob's ship, Dr. Henry had not slept in 30 hours. His eyes were red from staring at screens and his hands shook from drinking too much coffee. But he could not stop working, because every file he opened revealed something extraordinary. He called Jacob to the science station to show him a three-dimensional star chart. It showed the galaxy as it had been millions of years ago. Henry pointed to glowing dots scattered across the map and explained that each one represented a world where the architects had seeded life. There were thousands of them. The fascinating part was that the architects had used different approaches for different worlds. Some species got heavy intervention and guidance while others got minimal help. Earth was the only planet that got absolutely nothing after the initial seeding. Amy joined them and understood immediately. Earth was a control group in a scientific experiment. The architects wanted to see what would happen without their influence. Henry pulled up another file showing genetic comparisons. Every intelligent species in the galaxy carried some architect DNA, but it had been heavily modified. The Vex had been engineered for strength and durability. The Keltheran were designed for longevity and perfect memory. The Theron were built to adapt to extreme environments. But humans were different. Jacob understood what the data meant. Humans were baseline. They were the original template unchanged except by natural evolution over millions of years. Henry explained excitedly that this gave humans something the other species did not have. He called it genetic flexibility. The other species were optimized for specific traits, but that optimization made them less adaptable. Humans could thrive in many different environments and learn a wide variety of skills. They could innovate in unexpected directions precisely because they were not specialized for anything. This explained why humanity had risen so quickly in the galaxy, despite being newcomers. While other species had superior technology and longer histories, humans were remarkably good at improvisation. They found unconventional solutions to problems. They were not the best at any single thing, but they were decent at everything. Henry's expression became serious. The repository contained warnings along with all the knowledge. The architects had not just disappeared peacefully. They destroyed themselves in a civil war fought with weapons that could unmake reality itself. They left these messages as warnings to prevent their descendants from making the same mistakes. A new holographic message appeared on screen. This architect looked older and more tired than the first one. The figure spoke about achieving godlike power without the wisdom to use it properly. The architects had split into factions, and each group believed they knew the right path forward. The war lasted only 3 years, but it was enough to shatter their civilization. Most of the galaxy became uninhabitable, and it took millions of years for life to recover. The hologram continued explaining why they created the genetic experiment. They hoped that by starting over and forcing their descendants to develop naturally, they might achieve balance. Technology without wisdom was just destruction waiting to happen. The architects begged their descendants to learn from their failure. Jacob felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Humanity now had access to incredible knowledge and power, but they also carried the burden of not repeating the catastrophic mistakes that destroyed their ancestors. He ordered Henry to send the warning message to Ambassador Claire immediately. Everyone needed to see this. Earth Command needed to understand what was at stake. Back on Earth, representatives from every nation gathered in Geneva for an emergency session. President Laura Manning addressed the assembly, and her face appeared on screens around the world. Her expression was grave as she spoke about standing at a crossroads. She said humanity could use their inheritance to claim dominance and assert themselves as the galaxy's rightful rulers. Or they could remember that the architects fell because power corrupted them. She proposed taking a different path. Laura outlined a plan to establish an international body to oversee the integration of architect knowledge. They would share discoveries with friendly alien species and, most importantly, proceed slowly and carefully. Not every piece of technology should be developed immediately. Not every weapon should be recreated. She acknowledged that some people would call this weakness. They would say humanity was squandering their advantage. But she would rather be called weak than become the next civilization to tear the galaxy apart. The architects gave humans their knowledge. Now humans needed to prove they also inherited the capacity to learn from mistakes. The vote was not unanimous and implementation would be complicated, but humanity made their choice. They would walk the careful line between claiming their inheritance and avoiding their ancestors' fate. Jacob received the news and felt relieved. It was not perfect because nothing involving politics ever was, but it was a start in the right direction. Elder Myra contacted Jacob directly. She told him she had studied humanity for many years and never imagined they carried such significance. But after reviewing human history, she believed they might succeed where the architects failed. Jacob asked why she thought humanity would do better. Myra replied that humans had struggled. They climbed from caves to stars on their own merit. They made mistakes, and their history was filled with wars and terrible acts. But they also learned from those mistakes. The architects never had to struggle because they were born into power. Humans earned theirs through effort. That made all the difference. The transmission ended, leaving Jacob with mixed feelings of pride and worry. Humanity had been given an incredible gift that came with equally incredible responsibility. How they handled it would determine not just their own future, but potentially the future of the entire galaxy. The ancient gate continued glowing with steady light. Its repository of knowledge waited to be explored carefully. 3 million years of waiting had ended, and now the real test would begin. Not everyone was happy about humanity's revelation. In the darker corners of the galaxy where the Council had little control, the news was received with fear and anger instead of wonder. Extremist groups from multiple species began planning attacks against human settlements and ships. Commander Kyle Sanders was head of security aboard Jacob's ship, and he reviewed intelligence reports with growing concern. Alien extremists saw humanity's inheritance as an existential threat to their own species. Meanwhile, human supremacist movements were forming on Earth and claiming the right to subjugate the lesser species that the architects had artificially created. Kyle told Captain Jacob during their morning briefing that they were sitting on a powder keg ready to explode. He had confirmed reports of at least 6 major incidents in the past week alone. A human colony had been attacked by Vex extremists. A group of human militants tried to seize a council research station. The violence was escalating rapidly. Jacob rubbed his temples, feeling the stress more than ever. The bridge crew worked quietly around them, processing data from the repository while staying alert for threats. The ship had become a symbol as the first human vessel to unlock the architect's secrets. That made them a target for anyone who opposed what was happening. Jacob asked what Earth Command was saying about the situation. Kyle explained that Command wanted them to continue the research mission, but they were sending 2 more warships as escorts. Earth was mobilizing the entire fleet just in case things got worse. He hesitated before adding that intelligence was picking up communications about a coalition forming. Multiple alien species were discussing whether to destroy the repository and seal the gate permanently. Jacob felt bitter anger rise in his chest. These species wanted to destroy humanity's inheritance simply because they feared what humans might do with it. It was the same prejudice humans had faced since joining the Council, but now amplified to dangerous levels. Dr. Henry approached with his datapad clutched tightly. He said he found something that might help the situation. It was a file labeled the Unification Protocol, and he thought it could make a difference. Henry projected the contents onto the main screen. It showed a schematic for a device along with detailed instructions and another message from one of the architects. The holographic architect explained that this device was designed to facilitate understanding between different species. It created a neural link that allowed beings to truly comprehend each other's perspectives and emotions and reasoning. The architects had used it to prevent conflicts by ensuring all parties could genuinely understand their opponent's viewpoints. Amy studied the schematic carefully. She said it was like a forced empathy machine which could be either brilliant or terrifying, depending on how it was used. Henry agreed it was probably both, but he pointed out the limitations built into the design. It required voluntary participation from everyone involved. It could not be weaponized or used to control minds. It only worked for direct communication between individuals. It was not mind control but simply complete and genuine understanding between 2 parties. Jacob considered the implications carefully. If they could get the leaders of extremist factions to use this device and truly understand each other, it might stop some of the violence. Kyle interrupted to say it might not stop everyone. Some people were committed to hatred regardless of understanding, but it could help with those who were afraid rather than truly malicious. Fear could be addressed through understanding, but pure malice was harder to change. Jacob made his decision quickly. He told Henry to build the device and send the specifications to Ambassador Claire. If this worked, it could be exactly what the Council needed right now. On the Council's diplomatic station, Claire was fighting a different kind of battle. The Council had split into multiple factions, and each one was pushing their own agenda. Some wanted to grant humanity full access to the repository. Others wanted to restrict or even revoke human membership entirely. The moderate voices like Elder Myra were struggling to maintain order in the chaos. A representative from the Korthan species was particularly vocal. The Korthan were known for their militant approach to everything. Their representative shouted that the situation was impossible to accept. Humanity had access to weapons that could destroy entire star systems. The Council could not simply trust them not to use such power. Elder Myra countered calmly that humanity had volunteered to share all information from the repository. They had implemented safeguards to prevent misuse of dangerous technologies. She asked what more the Korthan wanted them to do. The Korthan demanded that humanity submit to Council oversight. They wanted observers stationed on Earth and all human colonies. They wanted the ability to verify that humans were not developing architect weapons in secret. Claire felt her anger rising at the suggestion. It was essentially asking humanity to surrender their independence and become second-class members of the galactic community. Despite being the architect's true descendants, humans would have fewer rights than species who had been artificially elevated. Before she could respond, her communicator chimed with an urgent message from Jacob's ship. She read it quickly and then looked up with renewed hope in her eyes. Claire announced that humanity had recreated an architect device called the Unification Protocol. It allowed complete mutual understanding between parties who used it. She proposed using it right here in the Council chamber. She would share humanity's perspective with everyone and understand their perspectives in return. No more talking past each other or making assumptions, just truth and genuine comprehension. The chamber fell silent as delegates considered her proposal. The Korthan representative looked suspicious and asked what prevented this device from being a weapon. How could they know it would not allow humanity to manipulate their thoughts? Claire transmitted the specifications to all delegates. She explained that the device was simple and straightforward. Two parties used it voluntarily, and they gained perfect understanding of each other's emotional and logical state during the connection, nothing more and nothing less. If anyone was afraid of what humans might learn about them, perhaps that said more about their own secrets than about human intentions. It was a calculated risk and a direct challenge. But Claire was betting that most council members wanted peace and understanding, even if fear was currently driving them toward conflict. Elder Myra was the first to volunteer. She said she had lived for 6,000 years and witnessed countless conflicts born from misunderstanding. If this device could bridge the gap between species, she wanted to be part of that process. One by one, other delegates agreed to participate. Not everyone agreed because the Korthan and a few other militant species refused outright. But enough delegates volunteered to make a difference. Within hours, diplomatic teams were traveling to Jacob's ship to test the unification protocol. The first session was between Claire and Elder Myra. They sat facing each other in a quiet chamber, and each placed their hand on the crystalline device that had been built using the architect's designs. The moment it activated, Claire gasped at the overwhelming sensation. She could feel Myra's vast age and the weight of thousands of years of memories. She understood the elder's caution, which came not from prejudice, but from having watched hundreds of promising species destroy themselves with premature access to advanced technology. She felt Myra's genuine hope that humanity would succeed, mixed with deep fear that they would fail as so many others had failed before them. Myra, in turn, felt Claire's determination and experienced humanity's resilience. Born from having to fight for every single achievement, the elder experienced humanity's frustration at being dismissed and underestimated for decades. She felt their pride at finally having their worth recognized. Most importantly, she felt their sincere desire to use their inheritance responsibly, despite all the temptations that power brought. When the connection ended, both beings sat in silence for a long moment. Neither spoke as they processed what they had experienced. Myra finally said softly that she understood now. Humanity had been tested in ways the architects never were. Humans knew the cost of failure because they had failed before, and learned painful lessons from those failures. Claire replied that she understood why Myra was cautious. The elder had seen so much death and so many civilizations that reached too high too fast. She was trying to protect humanity from themselves. Myra agreed, and added that perhaps humans were strong enough to bear this weight after all. The architects had been right to believe in natural evolution. Humanity's species earned its strength through struggle, and that made them different from all the artificially elevated species. News of the successful understanding spread quickly through the council. More delegates volunteered for protocol sessions. Not everyone was convinced because some refused to participate and clung to their prejudices and fears. But enough bridges were built that the council began to stabilize. The extremist attacks continued, but they became isolated incidents rather than coordinated campaigns. The coalition that had been forming to destroy the repository fell apart, as key members withdrew after experiencing genuine understanding. Aboard his ship, Jacob watched Earth appear on the view screen as they began their journey home. The crisis was not over, and there would be more challenges ahead. But humanity had proven something important. They could choose wisdom over power and cooperation over domination when it mattered most. 6 months had passed since the ancient gate opened for humanity, and everything had changed. The initial chaos had settled into a new reality where Earth and its colonies navigated the complex situation of being both newcomers to the galaxy and genetic inheritors of its most advanced ancient civilization. Captain Jacob Pierce sat in his office aboard the ship that now permanently guarded the artifact. The walls displayed progress reports from across the galaxy. Some news was encouraging, with human and alien scientists working together to decode architect technology. New diplomatic initiatives were bridging divisions between species. Carefully selected knowledge was being integrated peacefully into galactic society. Other reports were less optimistic. Extremist violence continued on both sides. Political tensions remained high within the council. Some factions were still trying to access the repository's military applications despite all the agreed restrictions. Dr. Henry entered looking tired but excited. He wanted to brief Jacob before the next council meeting. They had finished analyzing the architect's educational files and found what might be the key to preventing their mistakes. Henry pulled up a holographic display showing a complex web of information. He explained that the architects did not fail because they were evil or flawed. They failed because their society developed too quickly. They went from primitive to godlike in just a few thousand years. Their technology advanced faster than their wisdom or philosophy or ethics. By the time they realized they needed to slow down, they had already created weapons that could destroy reality itself. Jacob asked what the solution was. According to the files, Henry explained it was gradual integration. Not hoarding the knowledge, but not releasing everything at once either. They had developed a framework with Elder Myra and historians from multiple species. It was based on the architect's own recommendations for how they should have developed if they could do it over again. The proposal divided the repository's knowledge into tiers. Each tier would be released only when galactic society as a whole demonstrated the wisdom to use it responsibly. Multi-species committees would oversee implementation. No single faction could monopolize dangerous technologies. Educational and medical knowledge would come first. Military applications would always come last and under the strictest oversight possible. Jacob observed that this meant humanity did not get immediate access to everything their ancestors left behind. Henry agreed, but pointed out it also meant they would not destroy themselves the way the architects did. He had read their historical files carefully. The architects were brilliant but also reckless. They thought their intelligence made them infallible. Humanity had the advantage of knowing how that story ended in disaster. Later that day, the council convened for one of its most important sessions. Ambassador Claire stood before the assembled delegates, feeling the weight of history. Months ago, these beings had looked at humans with contempt or dismissal. Now they watched with respect and wariness and hope all mixed together. Claire began by saying that humanity had time to consider their inheritance and what it meant for the galaxy. They had a proposal to present. She outlined the framework and the gradual integration plan and the oversight committees. As she spoke, she watched reactions carefully. Some delegates looked relieved. Others appeared skeptical. The Corthan representative seemed almost disappointed, as if he had been hoping humanity would grab for immediate power and prove his suspicions. Correct. The Corthan pointed out that this plan meant humanity would not gain military superiority. The architects' weapons would remain locked away. Humanity was surrendering their advantage. Claire replied firmly that they were choosing survival over dominance. The architects had all the advantages and all the power, and it destroyed them completely. Humanity would rather build something lasting than repeat their ancestors' mistakes. Elder Myra rose from her seat, and her ancient frame moved with practiced grace. She said she had studied the proposal extensively. It was wiser than she expected from such a young species. The Keltheran Accord endorsed this framework and pledged to serve on the oversight committees. One by one, other species added their support. Not everyone agreed because the Corthan and a few others abstained from voting, but enough species supported it to make the framework official council policy. Humanity's inheritance would be shared carefully and gradually with the entire galaxy. On Earth, people gathered in cities around the world to watch the council proceedings. Reactions were mixed as expected. Some celebrated the decision as proof of humanity's wisdom and maturity. Others protested what they saw as betrayal and giving away humanity's birthright to alien oversight. President Laura Manning addressed the planet that evening. Her words were broadcast to every human settlement across the stars. She acknowledged that some people were angry and felt they were squandering their opportunity. She said she understood that frustration completely. But she asked people to consider what humanity had gained. She gestured to images of human scientists working alongside alien colleagues. Medical advances were already being implemented and saving lives. Peaceful cooperation between species was happening in ways that had been impossible just months ago. Laura explained that the architects gave humanity knowledge, but they also gave a warning. Power without wisdom led to destruction. Humanity was not surrendering their heritage. They were honoring it by learning from mistakes. They were proving that humanity deserved its place among the stars, not because of who their ancestors were, but because of who they chose to be. Today, aboard the ship, Jacob received a private message from Kyle. His security chief reported that extremist networks, both human and alien, were losing support. Not everywhere and not completely, but the momentum had shifted toward cooperation over conflict. Jacob asked if Kyle knew why this was happening. Kyle explained it was the unification protocol. Thousands of people had volunteered to use it and truly understand each other. Once someone experienced genuine understanding of another species' perspective, it became hard to hate them. It did not work on everyone because some people were too committed to their prejudices, but it was making a real difference across the galaxy. That evening, Jacob stood in the observation deck watching the ancient gate pulse with steady, welcoming light. Lieutenant Amy joined him with 2 coffee cups in hand. She asked if he was thinking deep thoughts. Jacob replied that he was wondering what the architects would think if they could see humanity now. Would they be proud or disappointed or surprised by how things turned out? Amy said probably all of those things at once. The architects created humans as an experiment, hoping they would succeed where the architects failed. So far, humanity was doing okay. Not perfect, but okay. Not perfect was an understatement. There had been setbacks and conflicts and political battles and ethical dilemmas. Integration of architect knowledge was messy and complicated and full of compromises and frustrations. But humanity and the rest of the galactic community were learning to work together. They were starting to see each other not as competitors, but as partners in building something better than what came before. A message appeared on Jacob's datapad. Dr. Henry was requesting permission to begin unlocking the first tier of medical knowledge for general distribution. Treatments for diseases that plagued multiple species, genetic therapies that could extend lifespans and improve quality of life across the galaxy. Nothing dangerous and nothing that could be weaponized. Just pure advancement for the betterment of all intelligent life. Jacob approved the request and added a note reminding Henry to implement everything gradually and carefully. They needed to do this right. Weeks later, the first medical clinics using architect knowledge opened across the galaxy. A Theron child with a genetic disorder received treatment that would let her live a normal lifespan instead of dying by age 10. A Vex veteran crippled in an accident regained the use of his crystalline limbs. A human colony gained access to clean water purification their primitive infrastructure could not have provided alone. These were not dramatic advances or miracle cures or overnight transformations, but they were real and tangible improvements in billions of lives, and they were just the beginning of what was possible. Elder Myra visited Jacob's ship one final time before retiring to her homeworld. She found him on the observation deck as she expected. She greeted him warmly and said she came to say farewell and to thank him personally. Jacob was confused and asked what she was thanking him for. He had just followed protocols and tried not to mess things up too badly. Myra said he had done much more than that. Humanity faced a test that destroyed their ancestors. They were offered unlimited power and chose responsibility instead. In her 6,000 years, she had rarely seen such wisdom from any species, let alone one as young as humanity. She stood beside him, and both watched the ancient gate together. She said the architects seeded life across the galaxy, hoping some of their children would surpass them. She believed humanity had already succeeded, not through strength or technology, but through the wisdom to know when not to use power. Jacob said humanity was still learning, and still making mistakes along the way. Myra replied that this was exactly as it should be. Perfection was stagnation. Growth required error and correction and improvement. The fact that humanity acknowledged their mistakes was itself a form of wisdom that many species never achieved. After Myra left, Jacob remained at the viewport thinking about the future. Humanity had been given an incredible gift, which was not just knowledge and technology, but a second chance to get things right. The architects had failed, but their descendants did not have to repeat that failure. The ancient gate continued to glow, and its light served as both warning and promise. 3 million years ago, a dying civilization placed their hope in a single world. They gambled that natural evolution would produce beings capable of using power wisely. Jacob felt the weight of that hope and the responsibility it carried. Humanity and its galactic neighbors were not perfect. They would stumble and argue and struggle with challenges ahead. But they would face those challenges together while learning from the past and building toward a better future. The gate had opened because humanity earned the right to their inheritance. Now, day by day and choice by choice, they were proving they deserved to keep it. Not as rulers or conquerors, but as partners in the grand experiment of civilization. They carried forward the best of what the architects had been while avoiding the worst of what they became. The ancient builders asked a question 3 million years ago. Could their descendants do better than they did? The answer was still being written, but for the first time in galactic history, it looked like that answer might be yes.